Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining for this session of the Everywhere She Maps professional development workshops focused on tips and tricks to boost your resume. As we launch into the presentation, we'll also be momentarily launching a poll that we'd love for you to fill out. All of your answers to the poll will be kept anonymous. We don't know who's providing what answer, but this will just be really helpful to us as we plan for future sessions and try to provide the most relevant content as possible for you. So with that, I want to introduce myself. My name is Courtney Clark. I'm the program director for Everywhere She Maps, which is a program of youth mappers. I am based in Columbus, Ohio in the US, and I will be presenting today with my colleague, Rhoda. If you want to introduce yourself as well, Rhoda.
Thank you, Courtney. My name is Rhoda Nyirenda. Originally, I'm from Malawi, but now I'm at Morgantown, West Virginia University doing my graduate studies. Yeah, I will be together with Courtney doing the presentations. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I will start the presentation, and my presentation mainly will focus on the general information about resume building, while my colleague Courtney will talk much on resume related to youth mapping to have more input as far as youth mapping is concerned. So our outline for the presentation will go as follows. We'll start with the definition of a resume, then components of a resume, then the formats for a resume, and also some general tips for writing a resume. So to begin with, we're looking at what a resume is. In general terms, a resume, we're looking at it as a summarized document of one's professional, educational, work qualifications, awards, and achievements created for the purpose of applying to a specific job. So in that sense, a resume is looked at as a marketing document, as your billboard to the employers, and not necessarily as your autobiography. So in this sense, therefore, a resume need not to be very stuffy, meaning to say it doesn't need to contain a lot of unnecessary information, but only the information that are necessary for the job that you are applying to. They're the ones which are supposed to be on the resume. Because as we know, a billboard, it is used for marketing. And if we know it, normally it doesn't contain a lot of information or a lot of issues, just simple and straight to the point. So likewise, a resume need to be very simple and straight to the point to draw the attention of the employers so that you can be called for an interview. And therefore, a resume is about the employers and not you, the person you're applying the job. So we'll look at the components, key components that are supposed to be on the resume. Basically, mainly there are supposed to be 5 key components, like personal information, objectives, work experience, education, and skills. But then there are other components that can be included if you have them, and also if they are relevant to the job. For example, things like activities, interests, awards, honors, licenses, and many more. And as we said, they must be included only if they are relevant to the job. And in this sense, if you are writing the resume for that component of the other, you don't write as other, but you put that component that you have. And also you don't need to include references on the resume because employers normally will ask for these if they want the references. So no need of including the reference on the resume. So we'll look at each and every section. So we'll start with the personal information. Basically, this is the section where you put your information, as the term can suggest, personal information. So the main important information to put on this section are your name, email address, and the phone number. These are mandatory, they have to be there. And normally the name is written using a higher font or a larger font than the other information like email and phone number. The reason is to make the name stand out so that the employers can quickly pick out whose resume is it. And also the email address, make sure the email address has to be professional, because we know most of the times we started like having emails, maybe we started opening the emails just for fun. We didn't really know the emails. So we normally used like fun names. So those ones are not supposed to be used as far as the job application is concerned. Only professional emails are supposed to be used. But there are other optional information that you can include on this section, like the address, the LinkedIn account, the blog, or if you have your web page, you can also include, but these are optional. And for the address, most of the times it's very important maybe to check with the organizations we are applying to, or what the situation is like in your country. Do they emphasize on the address? If they don't, it means it's an option you can put or you cannot put. And nowadays with the internet, many employers, they tend to follow up using the email address. That's why the physical address, normally they're just optional. And also you may include a photo, especially only when it is well established. It is a well-established norm in your country where the hiring organization is based. Otherwise, if it is not a norm, there's no need to include a photo on the resume. And most especially in the US, I think no need of the photo. Then following the personal information section is the job objective section. So for this section, normally for the people who do not have experience, maybe like students, of which sometimes we tend to forget, otherwise students also, they have a lot of experience. But in case you don't have experience, this section, you can skip it. But if you have the experience, then you can put this section. But when writing it, make sure that it has to be short, simple, and very realistic. And most especially about 1 to 2 sentences will be enough. And in this section, most especially the information included are your short-term professional goals and intentions for applying to the job opening, and the years of work that you have and which are relevant to the job that you are applying. And also your major qualities and skills that you have and that were advertised in the job, and also which are relevant to the job. And also you need to put on relevant degrees or licenses or certifications that you are holding. And also a closing statement describing the objective of your resume or why you're applying for that job. So we have an example on the slide. I think you can just look at it. It's just a short paragraph. So that's how the job objective is supposed to be written. Very short and simple. I think then we come to experience, but Courtney will talk more on this one.
Great, thank you, Rhoda. Yes, so the next section that you'll want to include in your resume is your experience. And one question that students may often have is what to include under experience, especially if you haven't previously held a formal job or internship opportunity, but Because of your involvement with youth mappers alone, we know that probably everyone on this call has fantastic experience that you can include in your resume, even if you haven't had that formal job or internship. And so this will go at the top of your resume under the objective if you choose to include an objective, and is really the kind of heart and soul of what you'll want to focus on in the resume. You'll go ahead and list your experience, whether it be work experience, volunteering, or something else, chronologically, but in reverse order. So making sure to post your most recent experience first, and then move down the page from there in reverse order. Some key information you'll want to include in this section is the employer or the company or the organization name. So it could be the name of your Youth Mappers chapter and the university that you're affiliated with, the location, so usually city and country is helpful there, the dates that you were employed or involved in this activity. If you held a title such as an actual job title, or maybe you were a chapter officer or even a Youth Mappers chapter member, that can be a great title too. And then finally, wanting to include several bullets that are very descriptive of your accomplishments from this experience and will really bring to life for the hiring manager what you can bring to the table for that organization. I've drafted an example of what this might look like for someone who maybe has served as a chapter treasurer for Youth Mappers. So really what I want to highlight in this example is that it includes a lot of results, both qualitative and quantitative. So you can see I've included that this applicant that we dreamed up had raised a certain amount of money for their chapter. They included the number of months and the actual dollar amount that they were able to fundraise, and the number of organizations they could recruit to sponsor the chapter. They listed the dollar amount of the budget that they were in charge of, and some other statistics about how they were able to improve processes within the Youth Mappers chapter. So following from this example, I want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into how you all can best talk about your Youth Mappers and OpenStreetMap experience on your resume. So as I mentioned earlier, these are wonderful experiences to highlight and can be very applicable to your job search process. But a lot of people have not heard of OpenStreetMap or Youth Mappers. And so you need to help translate these concepts for your audience. And even within the field of geography and geographic sciences, you should never assume that whoever is reviewing your resume has heard of OpenStreetMap, unless the position specifically states that you have to have experience in OpenStreetMap and that they are looking for someone to do those kinds of activities, editing the map, validating, hosting mapathons. Then you'll want to make sure that you're using language that's understandable to a wide audience. So for example, you might choose just not even to use the term OpenStreetMap on your resume. And I've included some examples of how you might help translate this for your audience. So for example, maybe you have trained a number of Youth Mappers chapter members in how to edit OpenStreetMap using ID Editor or JOSM. So instead of writing that on your resume, which could be really confusing for a hiring manager who doesn't know those terms, another way you could express that would be to say something like, developed and presented technical trainings to 20 fellow students on digital map making and satellite imagery interpretation. And that will be much more easy to understand for a wider audience of people who are reviewing your resume. Another term that we all use often, but is probably not widely known, would be mapathons. And so another way to discuss planning or hosting mapathons on your resume would be to talk about the actual event planning and management process, which are really important skills for a lot of positions. So you could say something along the lines of planned and led 3 events for the Youth Mappers chapter, talk about if you had to identify, even negotiate to secure a venue, there was a budget that you managed, if you created communications, marketing materials, and managed the registrations, if you created the content and presented it as well, make sure to mention that, because all of these are very relevant in-demand skills for employers. We just have to help them understand what a mapathon really is and how that can apply to their job opening. And now I'll pass it back to Rhoda, who will talk about the education section.
Thank you, Courtney. So we'll be looking at education section. So this is the section where you include all your education achievements, like the degrees that you have, or maybe the certificates. And also these are listed in chronological order, in reverse order. So the recent ones, you put them first. But the information to be included, you need to have the name of the school where you got your degree or your certificate, and where it is located, the type of the degree or the field of study, and the year that you graduated. And if you are not yet graduated, you need to put on the expected date for your graduation. And sometimes you may include the GPA, which is an option, but sometimes if you leave it out, normally the employers think that maybe it was lower than required, but otherwise you may put or you may not put on. And also you need to have a brief summary of important courses that you have taken, also an option. And those courses, make sure they need to be relevant to the job that you are applying. Otherwise you cannot just list all the courses that you have taken in all your college life. That will not work, but only those which are relevant. So as we said, you list the highest level of education first, which automatically is the recent one. So down here, there is just an example to show how it is listed, the years, the school, the degree, where it is located, and all that. Then now we'll look at the skills section. On this one also is where you list your skills, and those skills as they are related to the job. And these skills, mainly they can be hard skills or soft skills. So the hard skills are those which we normally learn in class or in a school setting or maybe on a job training. And most of the times they are the skills which can be measured. While for the soft skills, we don't learn them anywhere and they cannot be measured. But these skills, they are very, very important if you have them and if they relate to the job. They are very important to be listed. Many employers, they tend to look for these skills. So for hard skills, you may have the skills just as examples, like computer skills, maybe coding, the foreign language, mathematics, project management, and many more. While for soft skills, you look at things like communication, leadership, creativity, decision-making, teamwork. All those may be good examples of soft skills. And also there's need to be as specific as possible, mention the actual names, and also mention the actual names of the software or tools that you are able to use, because that also gives an upper hand if you are able to use a given software. So it's very, very important to mention specifically the software that you're able to use. Then now we'll look at the other component section. As mentioned earlier, this is the section which we're looking at those other things that you have. But when writing, you don't write as other section, but you put on that thing. For instance, maybe if you have licenses, and if the licenses are relevant to the job that you're applying, maybe I would give an example, like if you're applying for a job as a driver, then I think licenses would be the best component to include, because they will need what type of driving licenses you have. Likewise, maybe probably you are a medical professional, maybe a nurse or a doctor, then I think also this would be another good component to include, to show the licenses that you have that make you or qualify you to why are you able to practice as a medical professional. So licenses may be a very good component. And also maybe, for instance, like I would give like maybe the interest. If you are applying for a job, for example, like a tour guide, just an example, interest may be a good component in the sense that you need to show that you are interested in traveling. Otherwise, as a tour guide, if you don't have interest in traveling, then definitely that may not go well with you. So that's why we're saying these other components, they can only be listed if they are relevant to the job that you are applying. Then now we'll look at the format or maybe the types of resumes or how a resume may be formatted. So basically there are three types: chronological, functional, which is also called the skill-based, and also the combined. But in this presentation, we just focus on the chronological. So the chronological resume is the one which is most commonly used, and it is said to be the easiest. And this one mainly, you list the work experience by dates in reverse order, as the term itself is showing, where you put the most recent, you put them first. And this one is good for students as well as the experienced professionals, which means therefore the main section for this resume type is the experience section. But as we said, for students, maybe probably those who do not have the experience, therefore the education section may be the best, or maybe the one to be highlighted most if you do not have the experience. But for youth mappers, it means therefore you have a wide range of experience, even if maybe you have never been to a formal paid job. Whatever you are doing in the youth mapping, the activities, validating the mapping and all those activities, I think there will be better information to include on the experience part if they are related or necessary for the job that we are applying. And this type of resume, mostly it is important for the people who have consistent work or volunteer work and other extracurricular history and growth and achievements. And also maybe those who have never had major gaps in their employment. So it means you have stayed in one type of job maybe for a longer period, then that would be the best type of resume to put down on the paper. Then now, coming to writing a resume, we have some tips, the general tips that can help to write a good resume. So we're saying before you start writing your resume, firstly, you need to do a research about the organization or maybe the company that you're applying to. Most especially, you need to know their mission statement and also their values. Because if you research in those areas, that will help you to have or to come up with keywords that can be used in your resume. Because their mission statements or their values, normally they use the keywords for their company or their organization. And this information, most importantly, is found maybe in their web pages on the About Us page. Is where you can find the mission statement or the values. And then also you need to research the position that you are applying for. That position will also help you to take note of the keywords that can be used in your resume. And also you need to know the adjectives or nouns or phrases that occur repeatedly. That also can help you how you can frame your maybe work experiences and maybe the skills. And also you need to know the language the company is using. Otherwise, you may write your resume in a different language while the company or organization is using a different language. Then I think in that way, it may not go well with you, but otherwise, knowledge of the language of the company is very important. And also you need to reflect and outline your strengths. And most importantly, it is important that as we are doing our daily activities, whether the youth mapping activities or whether we have a paid job, I think it's very important sometimes to just take note of whatever we are doing, so that when it comes to writing the resume, we'll just pull out all those things and take out the things which are necessary for the job. Then that can help us quickly come up with a good resume as far as our strengths are concerned. But the problem is mostly we tend to update our resumes when we see a job. So that gives us pressure or makes us to miss out very important qualities that we have.
Thanks, Rhoda. And I just want to add briefly that one of the reasons it's so important to use keywords from the position description when you write your resume is because more and more employers are using software to scan all of the resumes that they receive. And this software will alert the hiring manager or the human resources team as to whether the resume includes some of the key skills or words that they are looking for. So for example, if one of the requirements of a job is that you be proficient in Python or R or a coding language, if the software scans your resume and doesn't find the name of that coding language, but it was listed in the position description, then they may automatically discard your resume and not even have a human take a look at it. So make sure you're aware of those software programs and including all of those really important keywords on your resume, as long as they apply to your experience and your skills. Of course, don't include keywords that are not relevant to you on your resume. Thanks. Go ahead, Rhoda.
Yeah, very important to include only keywords relevant to the job. Yeah, then now we'll continue looking at the tips. So I was saying, make sure also to keep your resume as short as possible. One page is recommended, just a page is recommended. And for the CV, this one mainly is important for those with a lot of experience and our friends in the academia, like the lecturers or the professors. They're the ones mostly using the curriculum vitae because normally it can be very long and it requires a lot of things like maybe publications, the classes they have taught, or journal articles, the conferences and the like. So for somebody with little experience and not in the academia, the resume is the best and one page is recommended. And you need to use bullet points when listing the skills or the accomplishments. And also make sure you select or you use a font which people can be able to read and not very small or even maybe very big. That makes, it doesn't go well with the readers. And probably 10 and 12 points is the best font size. And for the margins, make sure it's about 0.8 inches and 1 inch. For this one, I think no more or no less. Because we're looking at the main goal of a resume is to move you forward to the next level of hiring process. And therefore, you have many more opportunities to describe the experiences and expertise to the employer during the interview, which means, therefore, the resume is just mainly for you to get called for the interview. But to get hired, that depends on the interview. So making the resume as simple and short and straightforward to the point, highlighting the many qualities that you have related to the job that may automatically attract the employers and call you for the interview. And it is important to write in the past tense for experiences and positions that you are no longer holding. You use past tense and also action verbs. And also you need to avoid personal pronouns. So for the action verbs, you can write as the statements on the slide. For instance, like developed and implemented a social media strategy to increase awareness of the Youth Mappers chapter, increased Facebook and Twitter engagement by 12% over 4 months. So like developed is an action verb. It means automatically it shows what you were doing and not necessarily just writing responsible for Youth Mappers chapters. That's just like too general. It doesn't really tell what you are doing. And make sure you customize the resume for each position which you are applying, which means therefore each resume is meant for a particular or a specific job. So any job that comes up, you want to apply, it means you need to have a different resume. So it means there's need for updating our resumes now and again. And also check for spellings and grammar errors at least several times. And sometimes it's very good to ask our mentors, professors, and even our peers for some feedback. For instance, to look at the resume if it is clear or if the address is required as listed in the position description. And most importantly, you need to be truthful, as already mentioned several times, that whatever skills you list, those need to be related to the job, and make sure that you are mentioning the skills that you really have or you really know, not that just listing they are related to the job but you don't have, then that is not okay. And in some places it is very illegal to lie on a job application. So if you are seen lying on a job application, it means you are just painting yourself not a good not in a good way. And then we'll look at what to avoid. For instance, we are saying you do not need to include a photograph of yourself unless it is a norm for the organization, and especially in the country where the organization is based. Otherwise, if it is not a norm, no need of the photograph. And also avoid using odd-sized papers, not very big, not normal papers or loud colors, very bright colors. And also you don't need to include your height or weight, date of birth, where you were born, your marital status, your ethnicity, health issues, or reasons why you left the previous job, names of your former supervisors, or specific addresses or phone numbers of your former employers. And also no need of salary history or requirements. And also it's not necessary to title your resume, like maybe on top you write as a resume. That one is not required. You are not supposed to put. Yeah, it means now I've come to the end of the presentation. Thanks so much for your attention. Unless there are some questions.
Yes, wonderful. Thanks, Rhoda. So to our participants, just wanted to quickly remind you, if you haven't filled out the poll, we would love to have your answers to that, which are completely anonymous. We've been answering some of the questions in the chat as the conversation has gone. So please check out the chat if you haven't been following that. And if anyone has questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself to ask or write those questions in the chat. So we'll give a few moments for everyone to think about what they may need to ask. And in the meantime, I'll be sharing some links in the chat for additional resources in future sessions. All right, well, it looks like we don't have any additional questions coming in, so that's great. I'm glad we could be clear and answer a lot of the questions as the session went along. As I just mentioned in the chat, please feel free to register for our future sessions. Through the Eventbrite, you'll have to register for each session individually, and we'll be sure to send you all of this information in a follow-up email. Oh, and it does look like we have another question that's come in. So Anne wants to know, in the last section about the things to avoid, one of the things listed is names, addresses of former supervisors. So I'm presuming this is usually the reference section, and wouldn't that be necessary? Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, it's no longer common for employers to want to see your references directly on your resume, because most job applications are online now. If they require your references up front, that will simply be a part of the online job application. And so you may be required to type in that information as you apply. If not, be sure that you have your list of references available in a separate document. You'll want to format it so it looks similar to your resume in terms of the font and the size and the layout, but just having that list of references so that if an employer does ask for it, you can quickly email that over and you won't be scrambling to put together your list of references. And this isn't directly applicable to resumes, but I always like to remind people, just let your references know about the jobs that you are applying to and that they may be asked to provide a reference for. Make sure you send them your most up-to-date resume so they can be aware of what you've been up to, especially if you haven't worked with them recently. And make sure you also send them the position description for the job so that when they're talking to the employer, they can be sure to know what to highlight about your skills and expertise. And so, yeah, just making sure you keep in great contact with them is the best practice. And then we have another question. Oh, I'm not sure I understand that question, Prajwal. Would you mind maybe retyping it, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself as well if you'd like to ask? Oh, no worries. It looks like, yeah, maybe you got cut off in your typing. Okay, great. And Dara wants to know, how much notice should you give someone when requesting a reference? Also a great question. So personally, when I have been in a position where I am looking for jobs or internship opportunities, I first reach out to the people who I would like to serve as my references. I let them know, hey, I'm going to be applying for jobs very soon. Just wanted to check if it's still okay to list you as a reference. So just giving them kind of that heads up that I'll even be applying for internships and for jobs. And then as soon as you know that you're going to apply to a position, it's great to just send your reference an email so that they are aware. I think the more advanced notice that you can give, the better. Helps to keep that strong relationship you might have with your reference and respect their time as well. Of course, I think all of us probably will experience situations where we find that perfect job we want to apply for, and it's kind of last minute. And so, that's okay too. Most references are pretty understanding of that, as long as generally you're giving some, at least, a week or two of notice. All right, and another question, under experience, are we supposed to state the roles we took during our internships? Yes, absolutely. So experience should include like formal jobs that you've held that are relevant, internships, volunteer roles, leadership roles within your university, whether that be like student organizations or associations, all of those would go under experience. Great questions. Okay, so for students trying for PG abroad, what can we add to make it more eye-catching, and what can we do? Studying, I think, undergrad in agriculture. Prajwal, what does PG stand for? I'm not familiar with that term.
Me too, I'm not.
I want to make sure I answer accurately. Oh, like a master's degree. Oh, postgraduate. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful. What you can do to make it more eye-catching? Well, I would definitely be sure to include any research that you've conducted. We didn't really talk about including research on a resume, but especially if you're applying for a master's program or a PhD program, obviously that will be really important to include, so you can show that you have those research capabilities. And I think every university has different preferences. So I'll say, in my own experience, when I was applying for my master's program, really the best tool for me was just to be in contact with a recruiter from the university and directly ask her those kinds of questions. And she was very open and very receptive to actually helping me craft my application to make sure that I was providing everything that the university needed, because they want you to have a successful application as well. And so maybe for certain postgraduate degrees, you might be required to submit more of a CV that's a longer format. So I would say just really being in touch with the university that you're applying to, even talking to current students and seeing what they did is probably your best bet there, because it's hard to generalize for that kind of application.
And also maybe the courses related to the program that we are applying, that I think would go well.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Rhoda. That's a great point. All right. Well, I think we can wrap up the session. Thank you so much to all of you. As I mentioned, we'll send out a follow-up email. I'll include my email address if you have additional questions as you're building your resume. Very happy to answer those for you, and hope you all have a great day and best of luck as you search for jobs and for internships. All right. Goodbye. Thank you.